Hello, it's Reija, and welcome to another live show. Today, I am going to be talking all about my April read. So, this is essentially an April reading wrap up without the pesky editing part. And I have to say that I have actually really enjoyed doing. I have actually enjoyed doing these live shows because it allows me to engage more with people and also just sort of be more loose and relaxed, and I don't have to think about too many things or worry that I forget to say something because I can always just, answer questions and stuff. So, without further ado, there might be some cats behind the sliding door there, so don't mind them. But without further ado, let's just get on with the things that I read. I read a bunch of webtoons once again. I read some comics and manga, and I read some novels as well. And also, I DNF'd a bunch of stuff. So I might as well start with the DNFs actually. So let's get on. I prepared some amazing slides here. So I will just start to talk about the books that I did not finish. I have not rated any of the books that I didn't finish, but I assume that um, you will be able to interpret what I think about each and every one of these titles. Starting with Secondo Piatto by Mango Gom and Best Restaurant, and translator once again not credited. I read this through Manta. And I also DNF this, I think, around 17 episodes because this was not great. Um, this is basically a boys' love story. It is about this police officer and a chef in an Italian restaurant who meet each other in their like prospective friend's wedding. They both have like unrequited feelings for the bride and groom, respectively, and to assuage their heartache, they decide they basically have an drunk one night stand, which then leads to them having these hookups in order to mend their broken hearts. And it is well drawn. I will give it that. The cover is basically what you will get. It is pretty beautiful to look at. There are some anatomical kinks once in a while, but for the most part, it is actually pretty nice to look at. However, um, I just felt that this is a regurgitation of all of the toxic boys love genre tropes that I have tried to distance myself from and tried to, read something that is actually a good story and not just, you know, erotica. There's nothing wrong with reading just erotica, but I'm just like nowadays I just wish that the story will have something more, some character development, something interesting in the dynamic, and this just didn't. It was very like boring, I would say. Like that is the biggest crime of this one, that is just uninteresting and unappealing to me. Content warnings include dubious content and an unbalanced power dynamic because this police officer also is hooking up with this chef while this chef is uh, is a person related to an ongoing investigation that he has. So there's a little bit of an like icky dynamic there, and also a content warning for these people having sex while they are intoxicated, therefore not really able to fully consent. So there's that. Secondo Biatto. I read it at on the Manta app, so it is available in English to read. And then another one that I DNF'd, Just Contract Lovers by Mola and translated by Sohyun Ri. And this is pretty much the same as Secondo Piatto, a different story beat. It's basically kind of fake dating turns into real dating. There's some miscommunication between between the leads. And oh, hello, Kat. Nice of you to join. Anyway, there is some miscommunication and lying between the leads, which then leads the other main character to go into this contract and fake relationship on, like, not with the full information. So therefore he is not, like, he's not going into it with the full, like, picture of what the relationship is going to intend or entail. So there's that. I didn't like the art style for this one. I stuck around for 20-ish episodes before I decided to call it quits. I generally this was basically a month of DNFing and axing all of the webtoons that were just not doing it for me. And this was one of them. Once again, very sort of old school in the tropes, kind of like early 2000s type of boys love. And the content warnings include lying, coercion, once again dubious consent, which is given basically for these kinds of stories, child abuse, and implied domestic abuse. And then we are slowly getting better. Falling for the Enemy by Myun Lee, of Jin, Already Okay, and Yondu, and translated by Catherine Stulik. And this is basically a second world fantasy romance. The the title of this story, I don't think means what you assume it means. It's Falling for the Enemy, which makes you think that this is sort of like an enemies to lovers type of story. It has like a rivalry between the two main characters, but they're not really enemies. So what I'm thinking is that the title is actually Falling for the Enemy, as in you are falling for the enemy's plots, because otherwise the title does not make a lick of sense. Um, this is very, like, pretty to look at, very beautifully drawn and colored. Like once again, what you see on the cover is basically what you get in the story as well. Uh, I just felt like it was very slow to get moving, and in the, like, 20-ish episodes that I had read now, the story wasn't really progressing in a meaningful way, and the characters were not getting development. I felt like we are following like a bunch of plot beats to get from point A to point B, but the characters could be anyone, if that makes sense. Like, there just wasn't a lot there. So it ended up being a very shallow experience. Content warnings include violence, blood, and murder, and also a conspiracy. So you know to look out for that as well. And then Love and Leashes by Winter, once again, translator not credited. This I read on Webtoon, and Webtoon almost never credits their translators. You will be hard pressed to find any information on who translates all of these Korean and other language webtoons into English, because they do not disclose that. They have this sort of like fan translation webtoon site where fans can submit translations and then maybe sometime get credited on the actual site. But that's like its own weird rabbit hole that I haven't gotten into much. But yeah, Love Unleashes. I am actually very sad to have DNF this. Um, this is basically about these two coworkers getting into a BDSM relationship, a dominant submissive relationship, and it explores them basically learning about how to be in a consensual dominant submissive relationship. They are learning about the BDSM community at the same time, and also fielding all sorts of shenanigans at their work and also personal lives with regards to hiding that they are in a BDSM relationship from other people. And I have seen a movie that was adapted from this webtoon. It is on Netflix, and the movie is actually pretty nice. It is kind of like a shallow presentation of what this story is, but it was lovely and delightful, and and it had a full narrative arc, so I liked it. Whereas this is very meandering. It's like it's been like dozens of episodes long, and we are still not getting anywhere, it seems. And it is very slow going, and the humor is very slapsticky, and I'm not really into that. So I just decided to give it up while I was still kind of enjoying it, because like if I want to go back later, I will just binge all of the available chapters instead, because I'm just not. I don't have the energy to follow it as the chapters are coming out. Content warnings include dominant submissive partner dynamic, exploration of PDSM, and also sexual harassment. So I would recommend this if you are interested in those topics. This is by no means a bad series. It just wasn't for me at this stage. And then I DNF'd a novel finally. Oh God. I tried to give this a chance, a fair shake. 10 Billion Days and 100 Billion Nights by Ryu Mitsuse, translation by Alexander O. Smith. And uh, this this is basically the summary, like the plot summary of this could be distilled into one thing. What if Plato, Siddhartha, and Jesus of Nazareth walked into a bar and there were aliens? That's basically the gist of this story. I got about 35% in before I called it quits. This contains one of my least favorite tropes, which is that aliens were behind ancient civilizations. And I'm just not a huge fan of that, because there usually are some very racist connotations behind that trope, um, especially when you key into what cultures are usually conspirator are what ancient cultures are usually conspired to be actually done by aliens, if you get my gist. Anyway, I did not really get on. Like the 35% mark, I still didn't know what the point was, what the plot was. I didn't know how any of these characters were relevant to each other or the main arc of the story. And I think that at 35%, you should at least have the basic gist of where the story is sort of starting to go. And I wasn't getting it. And the translated version, the prose, while very pretty, it was very beautiful, and I thought that it was very like lyrical to read, but it was also very meandering. So at times I felt very bored. So I decided to call it quits. I'm sorry, Mamoru Oshii, I could not get to your afterword. Maybe some other day, maybe some other month, but this was not it. Content warnings include asphyxiation, child abandonment, and natural disasters, at least in the parts where I got to. And now I'm talking about all the Webtoons comics and manga that I did finish. So these are everything that I managed to finish during April, and there was quite a lot. And this is not including all the novels that I got to as well. So No Love Zone ended. Season 2 ended finally, and I finally got to like finish this whole series. I ended up giving the second season 2.5 stars, and it was basically like after the two main characters get together, all the interesting things about this series just kind of stop. Um, it starts off as this forbidden office romance, enemies to lovers, sort of like workplace bullying type of thing, and then turns into romance, and then becomes all like domestic, lovey-dovey stuff. And the latter part just wasn't as strong, and the main male lead kind of seems to completely forget that he workplace bullied and harassed his boyfriend. and starts being like very overly possessive, very jealous of like his boyfriend's like friends, and tries to like low key manipulate and isolate him from his friends. And I was like, not a fan, not liking this. And then it sort of just ends on this unwarranted open ending where the Enkyum asks Jihyuk, why did you fall in love with me, or why do you like me? And then the series ends with Jihyuk saying it's a secret. Like, I didn't care. I really didn't care to know why he had the hots for him. It wasn't like a it wasn't a big reveal. It wasn't a huge secret. It wasn't anything that the author had alluded to that there was any kind of big secret behind it. So it was just, I don't get it. So the series kind of started off strong and then flatlined and fizzled out, for me at least. So yeah, 2.5 stars. Content warnings include unbalanced power dynamic because they are essentially a boss and an employee, unwarranted jealousy, manipulation, and isolation. And then The Shape of Sympathy by Nodok, translator once again not credited. Manta, you should credit all of your translators, please. Like like Webtoon is really egregious. They don't credit anyone almost ever, whereas Manta is like half and half. Like they credit like some of their like translators and then not others, and that is very frustrating because I'm like, you're doing so well, you are crediting your translators, and then they just well, the other half not so much. They don't need any credit, and I'm like, ugh. But so second season of Shape of Sympathy also ended, and it is going into a very interesting dynamic. Once again, this has a very similar premise to Secondo Piatto, where you have these characters that have been pining for other people for a long time. They meet at a wedding where their the targets of their unrequited love are getting married to each other. They meet up. Later, they have a kind of like hookup, and their relationship starts to follow from there. But whereas Secondo Piatto goes straight for the erotica, goes straight for the like kinkiness of it, and kind of ignores any like characterization, character development, and any like social issues that might arise, like any of those like beats that might give tension to the romance. It just dives in straight for the sex. Shade of Sympathy actually is a very slow burn, and it actually really explores the psychological state of each of these characters. So you have Sonwoo, who is basically he has known for a long time that he's gay. He has he moved to live with his grandmother when he came out of the closet because his parents completely rejected him. And there were talks about like sending him, like there are allusions to like conversion therapy that he might have gone through as an adolescent. And now he is a teacher, and he also has had these unrequited feelings for a very long time for his like um, university like uh, classmate and dorm room mate. um, and he is essentially borderline alcoholic. He's very depressed, and he has a very bleak view on life. Whereas Yuri is kind of like always has assumed himself to be straight. He had these unrequited uh, feelings for his adopted sister, and like not necessarily in the way of like romantic love, but definitely kind of like this weird obsessive love for his adopted sister. And he's like trying to come to terms with his budding and growing attraction to Songwoo, while also kind of grappling with these ideas of feeling both shame and pity towards him and also kind of resentment. Um, so it's interesting because they have actually not had a lot of like romantic moments with each other, because the author is clearly trying to set them up to like get to a point where they can actually like have a healthy relationship, and there is a lot of baggage that needs to be like sifted through before that can happen. So yeah, this is one of my ongoing favorites, and I am currently reading the third season, which picked straight off the second one. Content warnings include alcoholism, obsession, depression, allusions to conversion therapy, homophobia, and bullying. So yeah, highly recommend this one. It is available on the Manta app. And then I read the 5 first volumes of Giant Days, written by John Allison and drawn by Lisa Treyman, and also Whitney Koger, Max Sarin, and Liz Fleming have worked on these issues. Lisa Treyman actually only worked as a full-on like artist for the first volume, and then after that, I think Whitney Koger took over, or one of the other three took over. And but Lisa Treyman's art is kind of synonymous with Giant Days because all of the cover art is hers. Um, she is the cover artist for like all of the volumes, which kind of like gives a sort of false impression of what the art is going to be if you go into the volumes assuming it will be the same as in the covers. It will not. It is very like um, the art style changes a little bit from each volume, and the inking style and coloring style changes as well, because the colorists and inkers change as well, like from volume to volume. So that is something to look out for. This has been very popular. I think there are like 9 or 10 volumes that are out, and this is a Finnish series. But honestly, I just couldn't get into this. I thought it was just okay, and I actually thought that most of the like main characters were utterly obnoxious. Um, like I just didn't think that their behavior was as thoroughly examined and also like questioned as it should have been. Um, so yeah, I decided to give up after volume 5 because I was just not enjoying it. And if I'm not enjoying a thing, that means that I am going into the consecutive volumes with a wrong attitude, and not allowing the comic to wow me anymore. So I decided to just DNF it. But this has a lot of fans. So if you are interested in like university life and sort of female friend groups and stuff, you might enjoy this. But I just wasn't a huge fan. And content warnings include excessive drinking, instances of drug use, obsessive behavior, and mild sexual content. And then I read To Your Eternity by Yoshitoki Oima, and the translation was done by Stephen LeCroy. And oh boy, I have also been watching To Your Eternity anime. We just finished the first season of the anime today, actually. And this is one of my favorite mangas that I've started in a while. Like, I don't know if it will become like a stick in your mind type of favorite in the vein that, for example, Full Metal Alchemist or Berserk have become, where I reread them constantly and stuff, or even like I need to know what happens next, like Witch Hat Atelier and The Girl from the Other Side. But I read these 4 volumes back to back to back because I was so immersed and wanted to know more about the world and what is happening. It is basically about a character who is immortal. He is a character who isn't really human, and his whole purpose is to kind of move forward and grow and evolve. And he's basically looking for stimulation and the world, and looking for stimulation from the world, and he can take on the shapes of other like objects, and he can create other objects that he becomes into contact with, and he can change into other people, uh, given that those people have died. So it's an interesting look into like humanity and survival, and what makes us human, and what makes us individuals. This is all about a character who is growing into their own personhood, and how different people that he comes across like affect him and change him. And you would think that you wouldn't really care about a character who is immortal, but the way the author does that is to basically focus a lot on the supporting cast of people who are very fragile. Let's just put it that way. And Yoshitoki Oima has also drawn and written A Silent Voice, which is a very popular manga about this romance between a deaf girl and a boy that used to bully her in school. So Yoshitoki Oima is really interesting that she wrote a very like super contemporary modern romance story, and now this is a kind of philosophical science fantasy. So it's a complete genre switch, and these stories couldn't be more different. But it is very interesting, and I'm definitely going to read on, waiting for the second season. So yeah, uh, 3.5 stars, or in general, like first, I gave the first two volumes 4 stars, and then the third and fourth. No, I gave the first volume and fourth volume 4 stars, and then the 2 and 3 in between 3 stars. So it kind of evens out to a 3.5 stars overall for these 4 volumes for now. And content warnings include death, violence, ableism, gore, and child death. And now I am going to talk about the novels and all the rest of the things that I read, including the Shorts and Sorcery book club pick for March. And I'm looking at the clock, and wow, I've been going way fast. And after this, I'm definitely going to be enjoying watching the Eurovision Song Contest final that is going to be happening. So I'm very happy about that. So let's start with Ogre Magazine issue 4.2, edited by Therese Mason Pierre and Lauren Stephen. This was the Shorts and Sorcery book club pick. And it is basically, excuse me, um, it is basically a literary magazine all about speculative fiction. And I made a full live show for this, where I talked about all of the stories that I liked, all of the themes. I read a bunch of poems from this, and I really liked it. It was very good. There were some stories that I didn't like as much, but overall, I would really recommend this this magazine, especially if you are looking for like a really diverse set of voices and a really like different approach to like narrative structure and storytelling. This had some really interesting choices to deal with the topic of woe and wonder, which was the theme of this magazine issue. I really enjoyed it. There was poetry, there were short stories, there was a comic. Like this magazine is a very well-rounded reading experience. So I would definitely recommend picking an issue up. I will say that you might have to wait for them to fulfill your order, because this magazine is run entirely by volunteers, and therefore they will have to manually uh, fulfill all of your orders. They don't have the same kind of like automatic like online shop system as, for example, other more established magazines have. So just bear in mind that you might have to wait a while to get your copy of a magazine after you have purchased it, because the magazine is completely run by volunteers. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Content warnings are pretty broad because each story has its own content warnings, and also the magazine is very good and upfront about mentioning them at the beginning of each story. And this generally contains, for example, topics on death of a child, violence, sexual harassment, and also allusions to starvation and disordered eating. And hello, nice of you to join. I am finally talking about all of the novels that I read in April. And then I read The Last Smile in Sunder City by Luke Arnold. This was this sure was a journey. Um, what good can I say about it? The chapters were very short, so this was excellent for an ADHD brain. Like it was very readable and well paced in terms that it was easy to like get sucked in and read along. But did I like it? No, not necessarily. Like this is essentially secondary world urban fantasy with noir elements. It is basically a detective story, a noir detective story. You have basically the grizzled, depressed, alcoholic detective as you do in like noir stories. And this is also a world that has had like a cataclysmic event where magic has disappeared, like magic has been taken away. And there have been like major consequences for all the magical creatures that have essentially become crippled because they have lost the connection to magic. And this book goes above and beyond to completely tell you that magic is gone. Magic is definitely forever gone. There's not going to be any more magic ever. Only to then turn tail. But what if magic was coming back in a different way? So it kind of undermines its own premise by dangling the hope of there being something more fantastical in the works. And yeah, it, essentially I just didn't end up loving it. I mean, it was fine, but I dislike the main character so much. And don't get me wrong, I love a flawed character, and this character is flawed as heck, but he was also uninteresting. He was as interesting as wet tissue paper. Like even with like this storied history and like I was like, why did this character attract these powerful people to be his friends? Because he doesn't give any type of personality. Like he's just a wet paper, like nothing. Like he is most interesting when he is self-medicating and being a douche after the whole cataclysmic event. But we don't like but that's his personality as a result of something happening. Whenever we are told about his past, he is like why were any of these people interested in this character? Because he's a blank slate. Like he doesn't have any interesting like personality quirks, he doesn't have any like outstanding characteristics, he doesn't have any special abilities. He's just he he just is. And somehow like I'm supposed to believe that he was some sort of like social butterfly and had all these connections to all these powerful, interesting people. I just I wasn't buying it, and also just the whole idea of magic being like I like stories where magic is coming back. I also like stories where magic has been like has disappeared and there have been like severe consequences for its disappearance. But like this book like the most interesting part of this book is the idea of this having been a very like ultra hyper magical world with a lot of magical creatures and how they have changed after the cataclysm. But at the same time, the book doesn't want like like it seems that the book doesn't want to hold on to that premise. Like it feels like the author was like, well, I came up with this cool premise about this magical world where the magic happened, but I don't actually want to commit to the world being a non-magical world anymore. So I'm trying to look for a way out, and that frustrated me. So yeah, I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. I doubt I will be continuing on to the next one. And yeah, content warnings include alcoholism, depression, survivor's guilt, violence, gore, and also supremacist viewpoints. So there's that. And then for something different, I read Bitter by Akwaeke Emezi, and I really liked it. This is the prequel to Pet, which I really liked. And what I thought was really interesting is that in Pet, you're never really sure when the story takes place and if the story takes place in our world or not. Like it is alluded to that it takes place in our world, but there's never a real town or city or state or nation mentioned. Whereas Bitter actually roots this story and this world to actually be our own world. Like the things that are happening in Earth. Uh, and I thought at first I thought that it was kind of like weird that Pet was intentionally very vague about where and how the story is taking place, whereas Bitter is like definitely rooted in reality. And then I started thinking about the themes, and the themes of Pet are that what happens if history gets completely erased and put under the rug, that we don't talk about the bad things anymore. So in that sense, it like in that way it makes sense that you are not given all of the context for what has been happening in the world and what all the atrocities were, and therefore you don't even know where we are as the reader. And then Bitter actually goes to like point out that okay, there was the civil rights movement there, James Baldwin has written and stuff, like these things come into existence, and then you are like, oh okay, now I have the context of what is happening. Because Pet is about a seeming utopia where all things have been solved, and Bitter is all about being in the front lines where things are still happening and bad things are still happening, and therefore all of the baggage of history is there with them. I thought that it was actually a really nice touch to make it more rooted in our current world, and it also like makes it so that people can distance themselves by saying that okay, this could be anywhere when it really couldn't. So yeah, uh, I thought that Bitter was for the most part well done. The ending though, the ending was kind of abrupt, and I felt like there could have been a little more establishing scenes and foreshadowing to make the ending like pop a little more. There was also, I think, some baiting for a possible sequel or a possible other prequel, including another character in this book, which I didn't mind, but it was just interesting that it was there. So I gave this 3.5 stars, and I really liked it. Content warnings include violence. There's some implied sexual assault. There's gore, and there's police brutality. And that was it. Those were all of the things that I read in the month of April. I DNF'd a bunch of stuff. I read a bunch of webtoon and comics and manga, and I read some novels. And this month is going already really nicely. I have almost finished one book. I have finished a comic, so I have a few things that I've already lined up and almost finished, and I might finish them by tomorrow. And on Monday, Translate-a-thon round 6 is going to start. So I'm going to be reading a lot during the next couple of weeks. And yeah, I hope to get a lot of reading done. Tomorrow there will be a Stitch and Bitch on Bree's channel, hopefully. We will announce it later on Twitter. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I will go and watch some Eurovision Song Contest final shenanigans. I honestly doubt that Finland is going to have any placement. I'm really surprised that we even got into the final because I'm gonna be honest, I don't like our song. I have nothing against Erasmus, but I just don't like our song for this year. So I will be very surprised if we make it anywhere near the top 10. So yeah, I will see you tomorrow for the Stitch and Bitch, and next week hopefully there will be an actual video on the channel. So bye bye, see you later.